Good evening and welcome to the Milton Planning Board. This is the 19th meeting of fiscal year 2021. My name is April Anderson. I'm chair of the board, and I'll introduce the other members. Cheryl
Chagaias, member.
Kathleen
O'Donnell, member.
Denny
Swenson, secretary.
and our staff, Allison
Quinn, assistant planner.
and Julia.
Getman, clerk.
Okay, so we are missing one member, Rich Beeler, who will be joining us a little bit later this evening, and our very capable town planning director, who is in a warrant committee meeting, but will also be joining us late this evening. On our agenda tonight are a few items, including a public hearing, which I will get to in just a minute. But first, I wanted to say this is my last meeting of my term, and I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of my peers on this committee for all of your hard work and for making this such a positive experience for me, especially this year while I was lucky enough to be chair during COVID. It's been kind of a tricky year. Been very, very grateful to work with all of you. I've learned so much and I've really had a great time getting to know you all better and joking and working and digging in and arguing and all of the things that we do here in our time working for the town of Milton. So I just wanted to thank you, Kathleen and Denny and Cheryl, and of course the amazing staff that the town has, and Rich as well, who is not able to join us, but I just wanted to mention that so I don't forget later on in the evening. And I see Denny has her hand raised. Denny.
So I just wanted to thank April. I'm going to try not to cry because I just can't imagine this board without you, because you've been here from the beginning and before I was here. And I have just learned so much from you. And I feel like we have all grown because of you. And I feel like you're one of those really special people out there that is a role model for me and for others. And I just can't tell you how much of an honor it has been to work with you and to be your friend, to grow with you on your journey. So thank you for sharing it with me and sharing it with all of us. And thank you again for running a crisp and quick meeting.
Moving on. Now you're making me well up. Thank you, Denny. That was very sweet.
Before you continue, if you don't mind, Rich just texted and he said he's actually waiting to get in.
Okay.
So maybe he can be let in, and then he can say something nice about you, April.
Oh.
I don't know what
Put him on the spot.
how to follow Denny, right? But it's been she said it all. So, but April, it's really been great working with you, and we've been a great team. I think all of us and others who were with us before, and hopefully, and those who come after you. But it's been great. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Rich Beeler, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Yeah, I'll jump right in there and thank you. Obviously we'll miss you. And you got the luxury of doing this all during COVID, so that's not been easy.
Well, I could do it from home, so that was positive.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I didn't mean to set off an April hits parade here.
No, but it's all well deserved. I mean, it's been great working with you, and we've worked together in the past, and I hope we'll work together in the future.
We will. Sign me up for one of those Reba panels.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so to take Denny's cue here, let's keep this moving because this is an out of ordinarily scheduled meeting because I was away last week and we needed to do this hearing. So thank you all very much for your willingness to meet on a Monday night. And I actually just see
Katie Conlon has her hand up.
Conlon with her hand raised. So I'm just going to ask her, let me see, can I give her permission? Sorry, Katie, I'm trying to figure out how to add you as a panelist.
April, I think for some reason I'm already listed as a panelist. I'm not quite sure why, but I wanted to take part in citizen speak, so I don't want to jump ahead if you have something.
So we don't have a citizen speak, but you're recognized, Katie. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you, April. So I'm Katie Conlon. I'm a member of the Select Board, but I'm really speaking tonight as a resident who is grateful for April Anderson's 5 years of service to the Planning Board. So
Oh.
thank you, April. I wanted to be here to just acknowledge all that you've done for the town and for the Planning Board over the last 5 years. It's not easy to juggle being super mom, working full time, and making a substantial commitment of time and effort to a busy volunteer board like the Planning Board. And you've contributed terrific experience and expertise and great ideas to the board. Just to think of a few things, I know you advocated for the town to make better use of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and we've done that over the last few years. And you worked really hard to rezone the Brook Road, Thatcher Street, Parkway intersection for potential development in that area that hopefully will move forward. And you've just taken a very positive, proactive approach to zoning and development overall. And I think you've been a great asset, and it's been a pleasure to work with you, albeit on a different board, but there are many times when we're working together on different projects. So thank you for all that you've done for Milton. The town is better off because of your service.
Katie, that's very nice. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I have had the time of my life, and even though I've always seemed like it at those late night meetings, I really have appreciated the opportunity, and it's helped inform not only my career and my work in this profession, but also just how I look at my community and all the things that I've learned about and now see things through a different light. For instance, trees, which I can't stop looking for now, and it's when I see streets without trees or
How about those retaining walls, April?
yes, true. That's a great change. The cut and fill, which I never knew a thing about. It's awesome. So thank you all so much, and hopefully you'll see me again. I expect I'll be here at my own time and speak soon enough. Okay, so let's move on with the meeting, because I know this, like I was saying, that this is an unusually scheduled Monday night meeting for us, and everybody has business to attend to, and there's an election tomorrow, and things. So let's try to stick with our agenda. The administrative items are really minimal. There's two things. One is the next meeting dates are scheduled for May 13th and May 27th at 7 p.m. And assuming that is fine with everybody. The only other item under administrative that we have to tackle tonight is the Select Board has asked us to nominate a member to serve on the Community Preservation Act Committee. And they're hoping that we could do that tonight. So I don't know if anybody has an interest in doing so. I believe they're charged with meeting monthly, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, I was on the steering committee for the coalition for like 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it probably would make sense if nobody else wants to do it. Probably makes sense for me to do it.
Well, we'd be honored to have you because you you volunteered for the other recreational, the open space. So you're going to become the guru in that arena, which you probably already are quite knowledgeable.
Kind of am, yeah, already. I'm on the board of the Mass Land Trust Coalition. I represent this town of Plymouth's Community Preservation Committee.
The question is, how do you have time for your sailing and with all of these things that you're
yes, that will be well, actually that's the advantage of Zoom, is that I can do a call from a boat.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I think it would be terrific with your experience. I'm sure you'll add a lot to the committee to get it off the ground. So
yeah, I mean, I don't have to do it as a long term. Well, I only have one more year on the planning board, so I wouldn't be doing it as a long-term thing.
And I believe it's a 1-year appointment.
Yeah.
And I should disclose that the Attorney General's office hasn't even approved of us.
Right, the bylaw yet. Right.
Yeah. But the Select Board is looking for members just so that they can be hitting the ground running as soon as it's available. So
yeah, I mean, I think as I said, I've got Tom Callahan and I have both been on that the steering committee for the coalition for since it started pretty much. So I think it would help to get it off the ground.
Great.
So I will nominate Kathleen O'Donnell to be the planning board representative to the CPA committee.
Well, second.
Okay, any discussion? No, then we could take a roll call vote. Cheryl Tagayas?
Yes.
Denny Swenson?
Yes.
Rich Beeler?
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
April Anderson. Yes, thank you very much, Kathleen.
Well, you're welcome. I'm happy to help out. It's so great to see it getting taken off here in town, and it sort of fits in with the affordable housing and the open space, because that's the two probably areas where we're going to be trying to spend the money. So
Great.
that'd be great.
Okay, so the first item of business here is a public hearing on the Residence D1 zoning district proposed amendments. I am going to go right ahead and promote Ned Corcoran as a panelist. And just for everyone's reference, this zoning article is a citizen's petition that the planning board is required to have a public hearing on before town meeting. We did have an informational session that Ned Corcoran and his client had joined us to bring us up to speed on what they are proposing. And we also talked about it at the last meeting. And I think there was some incredible interest in providing more affordable housing to seniors and physically challenged people in our town. And we want to hear more, and we had some questions. So I understand, Ned, do you have a presentation for us?
Yeah. Yes, I do. If you could share screen, I can. I've got a brief PowerPoint.
Okay, here we go again. I'm not sure. Can you just do it automatically, or do I have to give you permission?
Looks like I might be able to do it. Let me see.
I think you can as a panelist.
Yeah. Let me find what I was going to do.
So what we'll do is we'll hear a brief presentation from Ned, and then we will open up for questions of the board, and then open it up for public comment.
Let's see. Oh, can we see that?
No.
You can't see that.
Ned, did you hit share screen at the bottom?
I did.
Okay.
Hold on. I'm hitting sharing screen, but what I plan to present is not opening up as an option.
You might have to open it up first,
I've got it
and then
open.
when you hit share screen, it should come up as one of the options.
I've
we
got
have
it
your-
open.
Do we have your presentation?
No, I just finished it.
I wonder if you can email it to Allison and maybe she can open it for you. Do you
Try
have
that.
it, Allison?
I can try. I too am having a little bit of issue, but I could probably, I'm on my phone and my computer. So I will figure this out for you, Ned. Just email it to me.
Okay. I don't even have a share screen option.
Okay, Allison, I just sent it.
Okay. As soon as I get it, I'll pull it up.
Okay, and to the public, just bear with us. These are the downfalls of Zoom, actually, which reminds me, I forgot to disclose that this is a meeting in accordance with the governor's order superseding certain provisions of the open meeting law relating to the 2020 coronavirus outbreak emergency. This meeting is physically closed to the public. However, access is being granted by the Zoom platform. The meeting is being recorded by Milton Access Television and will be available on demand for folks who wish to watch it at a later date. But if you wish to tune in tonight, the Zoom information, dial-in, and meeting ID is on the agenda for the meeting.
So maybe I can start while Allison's trying to bring it up and at least introduce what we're doing. I do have about 12 slides.
Okay.
A handful of slides with respect to the site and the location proposed for a new building. A handful of slides that deal with the height of the proposed building and some options that we're considering to address that. And then 2 slides of the Home Inc. property which is the other property that's the subject of this bylaw. So some time ago, the town enacted provisions for the D1, residence D1 zone, which is dedicated to senior and handicapped housing age 62 and over. And there are two properties that are subject to the D1 zoning. One is the property at 600 Canton Avenue, which is the Winter Valley property. And the second is Home Inc., which is on Blue Hill Avenue, rough on the corner of Canton Avenue. Winter Valley, they're two very different developments. Home Inc. is essentially a apartment complex with 98 units spread out over 35 acres, with 14 acres of open space as well, and deeded to permanent conservation easement to the town's conservation commission. Those are sets of units, 4 units in buildings that are spread out over the entirety of that campus. They're low-rise, 2-story townhouse type apartments, and they operate almost like a condominium, where tenants sort of buy in when they get the opportunity. They buy in, they pay upfront a value of their leasehold. They lease it for as long as they can, and then when they depart, there's a refund of the initial investment, and the next tenant in buys over. And right now there are 98 units on that campus. To expand to really expand any further, would almost require them to tear down and start over. The campus is pretty well built out, and you'll see that on the aerials that we've got later. Winter Valley is a very different animal. It is 160 units of affordable senior housing. All of the units are affordable, and it's a proposal to add a new building with 36 additional units. It is a HUD subsidized development. As I said, there are 160 units. There are 172 occupants. 87% of the units are single occupancy. The average age is 79. 93% of the households are at or below 50% of area median income. And it's pretty diverse ethnically. There's about 2/3 Caucasian, and the balance, 20% Black or African American, Asian 9%, Latino, American Indian, and other make up the other roughly 6%. So it's pretty diverse. 76% of the occupants are women, and so it is operating it's full, and there's a fairly significant waiting list for additional affordable units. The folks at Winter Valley started working with Town Hall some months ago with the notion of adding an additional building. Currently, the zoning caps the number of units at 160. 4 of the buildings are sort of low-rise, 2-story with sort of 8 to a pod. There are 4 pods in each of those 4 buildings, and then the zoning allows an additional building, which would be building 5, to have 32 units. And we're seeking to add a building 6, which would be 36 units. The property is spread out over 24 acres as opposed to 37 acres. And the rear, approximately 3 acres, are dedicated to permanent conservation restriction. There's a roughly 2 to 3 acre parcel portion of the property well back from Canton Avenue as you follow the driveway in, that is now available for development, that had been subject to a 30-year temporary conservation restriction that had been deeded to the placed in permanent and in temporary conservation restriction. The additional 3 acres further back is permanent, as I said, conservation restriction. And because that 30 years is now passed, and the demand for HUD subsidized affordable senior housing is so great, they're now seeking to add this additional building. The building is would be set back approximately 1,600 feet from its frontage on Canton Avenue, about 650 feet from Highland Street. The property does have frontage on Highland Street, but that's much further down the hill. So it would be, this property sort of abuts the Milton Hospital property, which is on Highland Street, sits between this property and Highland Street. So it's very well set back on two sides from public ways. And then there are a couple of homes on Mergewood Road, private way off of Canton Avenue that is to the rear of 648 and 652 Canton Avenue, which are the subject of the Tamposi 40B applications. And here we go.
Allison came through for us, yay.
Well, I don't see anything yet.
We're counting on him.
So I managed to make it work 2 weeks ago in the Canton Ave 40B hearing, which was fortunate.
And I don't think this is you, Ned. This seems unusually different.
No, each one is different.
I'm sorry. This is like giving me a really difficult. I think it's the type of PowerPoint. Can you guys see that now?
No.
Can you try exporting it as a PDF and sharing the PDF?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
We can see it now.
Okay. All right. So where are we in our presentation?
We can start at start. Go right to slide number 2.
Okay. Can you see that?
No.
Oh, for the love of God. Hold on.
Can you go to slideshow?
There
we go.
It's just,
Here we
I think
go.
I'm going to have to
It's going.
Yep, you got it.
Okay.
So what you see there is outlined as 600 Canton Avenue. That is the Winter Valley campus. On the up top left, top of screen is Canton Avenue. To the right, in the top upper right corner is the Milton Hospital campus, and then you can see between is Highland Street. It is Winter Valley is served substantially by one main driveway. As you enter in, there are four different low-rise buildings. You can see them in pods, and then the furthest one heading to the lower right, in the middle of the screen, is the 3-story, 32 unit building. You want to go to the next one?
Trying. There you go.
There you
I
go.
think it's just delayed.
So this is the campus in plan view. Canton Avenue is at the top of the plan. Highland Street is to the right of the plan. As you drop down towards the bottom, you see a sort of a vacant rectangle and surrounded in blue. And just to the above that, back one, is an area just below the 5th building is a square area, and that is the area that is subject to this project. There are 3 single-family dwellings that abut on the left-hand side, all who live on Mergewood Road. The nearest property owner to this parcel is Keith and Kristen Yandel. And this building, as it's currently proposed, would be about 54 feet from that property line. We'll be working with the Conservation Commission to try and shove it a little further away. But as we get to the next couple of slides, I'll show you what that issue is about. So the next one, so You can see at the bottom of this slide is a sketch outline of a new building. That it would be building 6. And just above it is a parking area for 30 cars and a turnaround so that for pickup and drop off to the front of the building. And you can see in a darker green with a little sort of half circle around it down to the lower side, that is a wetland. And there's a circle drawn that's just off the edge of this proposed building, which is the 100-foot setback from that wetland. And clearer in the next slide. So here we are again in plan view of the proposed building. You can see the arc of 100-foot setback from the wetland. The question will become, as we work with the Conservation Commission, is the value of that wetland relative to the value of an enhanced setback off of the Yandle property. Right now, we're showing the corner of that building that's closest to the Yandles to be 54 feet. The required setback from a side yard under the zoning is 40 feet. So we need to be at least a minimum of 40 feet, proposing 54 here. If we build sort of up to, but not encroach into the 100-foot setback from the wetland. And that'll be a conversation with the Conservation Commission, whether we can move it further towards into the 100-foot setback in order to increase the setback of building relative to the Yandles. One thing we did do was they laid out the building so that it is corner closest to the Yandle property rather than full on either on a side view or the end view, so that the building will tend to taper away on each direction. Next. As I said, all 36 of these units would be affordable, and the building will be financed through a HUD, a subsidized loan through HUD. So we know that there are issues with height. It's an issue that I addressed right away with the architect and with the owner team. The proposed building would be 3.5 stories, 48 feet in height. Really getting at sort of a design that wants to be a New England style gabled roof building. So 3 full occupied stories, and then in accordance with the town's definition of a half story in a sloped roof, there's a fairly significant slope and height to the roof. The building itself is fairly large from a footprint perspective. So when you come up to the ridge of that roof, there's quite a bit of height associated with that. It's a building that is somewhat larger than the 32 unit building that is building 5. Building 5 is 32 units. It's 2 floors of 12 units with 8 on the third floor built into the roof. You'll see in a moment. But it's a building that lacks a number of modern both amenities and accessibility requirements. It was built about 25 years ago, before most recent changes in the accessibility code. So the bathrooms aren't particularly handicapped. The kitchens aren't handicapped accessible. None of the units have dishwashers, for example, which is an amenity that people come to expect today. And so all of those add-ons make the units larger, and to have the same number of units, we need a larger footprint. And to accommodate that within a gabled roof, we need a fair amount of height. The architect and I spent some time with Cheryl late last week looking at some options, and I've got some visuals of things that we've looked at. The architect is looking at alternatives to bringing down the height of the roof because we are sensitive to that concern. This next be lost. Um,
Is Jim DeVellis your architect?
no, he's our site engineer. The architect is John Downey.
Do you want me to promote them?
Yeah, if John could be promoted, that'd be great, as well as Sarah McLaren, who is the executive director.
I think she is already a panelist.
Okay. And Jim DeVellis, I see his name there, so you may as well promote him. He is the site engineer.
Ned, my apologies. There's something going on with my computer. It just keeps, I have to keep re-signing in to share a screen.
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So John and I, as I said, met with Cheryl the other day, and we looked at 50 Elliott Street, which is 4 stories over Elliott Street, 3 stories above the parking lot on the uphill side. It's around the corner from where I live on Milton Hill. And in that case, it was an example of how a gabled roof could be lowered down and created such that you could put a full floor within the gabled roof. I know John has some specific concerns with that. We're trying to avoid creating a roof that is too flat. That would sort of give it sort of an industrial look as opposed to a residential look and feel. But 17 feet above the ceiling height of the 3rd floor is a fairly significant difference. It's unoccupied space, but it's tall space, obviously. John, I don't know if you want to go further in sort of, I know you spent the weekend thinking about options and things that we can do and continue to try and do as we move towards this issue towards town meeting and see whether or not it's possible for us to adjust building height associated,
Right. We haven't, I spent part of the weekend looking at it, but I was just really sort of sketching because I had other things I had to do. But the issue really is the slope of the roof. The slope of the roof that is in the design that was up on the screen briefly is a 12 and 12 slope. It's what I would consider a typical New England gable roof slope. Somewhere, they're usually between 10 and 12 and up. And this one proportionally just looked right. It the issue with the height then becomes a matter of either there are a number of options. One is to reduce the slope of the roof. We've tried that, and I have that drawn, but it's not particularly pleasing visually. But that's something that can be done if we're intent on reducing the height of the building. The requirement is going to be reduce the slope of the roof, and that probably means changing the footprint of the building, probably elongating it somewhat. Right now, it's a particular length, and if I don't have the ends doing what the ends do, which you have 3 units at the end on each floor, then the building is going to get a little bit longer. The other option is to make the roofs flat. We're all a little concerned about having a flat roof look for this building because it's not particularly residential. I've assured Sarah that I would do my best to make it look as residential as I can if it has to go to a flat roof. If it goes to a flat roof, probably the floor-to-floor heights for the units themselves would probably get a little bit taller to within whatever number we get to. If we try to do and I did try this over the weekend to try the strategy that Ned and I talked to Cheryl about, which is to put some of the 3rd floor units into the roof. That's just going to reduce the number of units that I'm able to get on the 3rd floor, which will then again elongate the building in order to get the 36 units. So those are the choices. It's not rocket science, it's physics, and the size of the units will dictate the size of the building.
So we're working at it. it's not an easy it's not an easy physics exam to pass. So we're trying to get there. The other significant issue that we heard, and then I'll pass it on to you all for questions and comments, is what effect, if any, does the zoning have on Home Inc.? As I said earlier, Home Inc. is 98 units on 37 acres with 14 acres of that space dedicated to permanent conservation restriction all around the outside of the property. I don't think they have room to add any more. They could certainly add 62 units tomorrow if they have room, because they're at 98 and the zoning allows them to get to 160. So they could add 62 more units tomorrow. But to do that, I think they'd have to start over. They'd have to completely change the nature of the facility, take down units, build new, larger buildings, and really site them much differently than they're sited on the campus today. So yes, it's possible they could add a lot more units, and they could do it without any need for any additional zoning relief. But I think physically it'd be difficult for them to do it. As I said, that's fully occupied, so they would have to really sort of start over, move people out, and either rebuild in phases by adding, taking units down and adding somehow or otherwise. So I understand there might be some concern about expansion at Winter Valley as associated with this bylaw, but I think they'd be pretty limited in what they could do, and they certainly could do a lot more without the addition of these 36 units here. My sense is that the initial zoning may have been amended once previously to allow building 5, which is 32 units. The bylaw spoke to the notion of no single building shall contain more than 8 independent dwelling units, except that in a housing for the elderly and or handicapped development, 1 building of up to 32 independent. And so I think that 32 unit building may have been added at some point after the initial zoning was created, in part to help Winter Valley continue to grow and meet its demands. And knowing that the building in Winter Valley would be further back into the property, further away from Canton Avenue, an area that is otherwise essentially surrounded by wooded lots. So again, this is an additional pushback away from Canton Avenue into property that has otherwise been left alone. And so let me leave it at that and turn it back to you, April, and any questions that you and your fellow board members may have.
Okay. Board member questions, or do we want to go straight to the public?
I just want to verify something because I think I understand. So building number 5 already exists as the 32 unit building. So we're just talking about one brand new building on this site, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I do want to hear from the public, but I do have questions. So
do you want to ask your questions now, Denny?
Well, I agree with a lot of Cheryl's comments from the last meeting that I am concerned about setting any more precedents on height. I agree with April's comments that it is nice to get senior housing that we very much need. But I am very concerned about height and setting a precedent so close to 40B that we don't want to be that high. And I would like to hear some solutions. I know you're looking at some, but it seems like we're not quite there, but I defer to others to talk now.
I have comments, but I'd like to hear from the public first, April.
Okay. Kathleen and Rich, you okay to go to the public?
Yeah, I just said, I think my concern was, and the question had been raised before when we had this informational session, was that we were concerned that a change at Winter Valley would result in a change at Home Inc. And I think Ned's answered that question. I've also gone online and looked at the conservation restriction, which is a perpetual one, unlike the one of the three that are on Winter Valley. This one, the one on Home Inc., I don't see where, so I'm not worried about it affecting Home Inc. Because, you know, there are tenants in all those buildings and you couldn't be tearing them down to replace them. So I'm not as concerned about the unintended, you know, effect of a change at Winter Valley, you know, having an adverse impact on the Home Inc. stuff.
Okay. Rich, you good to go to the public?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to turn it over to the public. If you would like to speak, I would ask that you please raise your hand using the little icon at the bottom of the screen. And I will call folks in order. Okay. Ella Wells. If you would please unmute yourself and introduce yourself with your name and address.
Yes, good evening. Hi, I don't see myself there, but I guess I am talking.
Yes.
I'm Ella Wells. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9. I live at 179 Highland Street, and so I'm an abutter to Winter Valley. And I lived here back in 1989 when the zoning bylaws were changed, amended to allow for the building number 5 to be built. At that point, all the neighbors that abutted Winter Valley got together to try to help manage this new building. We were very unhappy with the barracks looking like buildings that were created. Before I even came into town, I was told that there was a very nice presentation of buildings, very colonial looking, nice buildings. And then when they were actually built, they ended up being the kinds of buildings that are there now. And so we were all concerned about making sure that the new building fit the Milton look of residences, and that they would stick to whatever was presented. So we reached, after a long negotiation session, we reached an agreement with the with MRE, Milton Residences for the Elderly. It is an agreement in existence. It was signed by the residents, the abutters. It was signed by MRE. And I even believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the Board of Selectmen signed it. I sent the agreement to the board, to Tim this afternoon, and I believe he was going to send it to the planning board members.
And you did. I read it. Thank you.
And I'm sorry that it came so late, but I learned about this development rather late. And I am concerned about how rushed this whole proposal is, because if the town had been notified about this weeks or months ago, why weren't the neighbors? And I ask that because in the agreement, in grants, there are 3 grants that go along with the agreement. One has to do with the perpetual conservation, the back 3 acres. The other one had to do with the 30-year conservation, and the final grant has to do with an overall restrictions regarding the front acres of the property. And in grant number 2, Article 2, there is a specific agreement that if once the 30 years are over, MRE wanted to build a new building, that they would in good faith work with the abutters to reach a similar agreement and give the abutters planning rights, not rights, but privileges with the MRE regarding architecture, positioning of the building, screening, landscaping, environment, et cetera, et cetera. And I would have expected that with that agreement in existence, that we would have been consulted early on in the whole proposal here by MRE. Now, granted, it's been 30 years, and maybe, you know, the MRE has changed officers, and of course there are new selectmen, but I would have thought that we would have been consulted. And I'm concerned that, you know, I don't think any of the abutters know about this agreement at all. I have not had a chance to really contact them, because outside of myself and another abutter on, I think it's Holmes Lane, everybody has changed. There's a new set of residents, but this agreement applies to the successors and assigns of the original abutters. So in general, I mean, I am not against the proposal of a new building. I see the need for it. I'm a senior myself, and I know that there's a demand. So I am totally for a new building. My concern is, number one, living up to this agreement and giving the neighbors the ability to inform MRE what their concerns are and to influence the design, the positioning, et cetera, the screening, the landscaping issues. But I'm also very concerned about this height change. I don't see the need for it. I understand now that we need certain new amenities, but there is sufficient land there to add the number of units. And what is magic about 32? What's magic about 36? That's not really going to help our affordable housing problem. You know, we need about 500 new units, don't we? I mean, you guys know better than I do how many more units we need to reach the 10%. Whether it's 4 more or 6 more or 2 less, this isn't going to make a difference. And I think we should try to preserve the look of a residence for Winter Valley, number one. And number two, the other reason we shouldn't increase the height is that's only going to help affordable house, the 40B developers. We currently have a 2.5-story restriction on the D1 zoning. Why raise it? Why not keep that as a precedent? You're creating a new precedent by raising it to 3.5 story. That doesn't help the abutters. That doesn't help the people that are fighting the 40P development. It hurts them. You're setting a new higher height precedent. So I agree with, I think you said Ms. Cheryl Tagayas was concerned about that. And I appreciate that. I am concerned too. I don't think it is beneficial to the people fighting the Tamposi development at all. I think it's counterintuitive to try to raise the height. So I would urge MRE and its council to reconsider, and the architect to reconsider the whole number of units to try to help the neighbors not raise the height. I think visually, it's not going to look like a mansion. It's not going to look like a beautiful, large mansion. And it's going to start looking like a commercial development. I guess those are my main points.
Thank you very much, Ella.
Madam Chair, could I just respond briefly, or would you like me to wait?
Let's just wait. We have another hand raised, so I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to
Sure.
talk, and we can address the questions at the end. The next person with their hand raised is Georgia Lee. If you could please unmute yourself and give us your
Sure,
address.
I'm here. Hi. Thank you for your comments, Ella. As a neighbor, I really tend to agree with most of what Ella said. And I just want to say, as an abutter, you know, I am already comfortable with the valley that we have. But the truth is, we've got the Tamposis who want to put in 200 some hospital looking to put in 70 units. And then we have Winter Valley as well, doing a big expansion and 30 additional parking spots. Then we're also going to see all of the trees on those 3 parcels cut down. We are going to see water running from all of those 3 parcels in new ways. We're going to see traffic. It's not just the one thing that we're looking at. We're looking at a community of residential homes, historic residential homes, that is now going to be surrounded by 3 developments. And Ned, I know you're working on all 3 of these potential developments. And so you know what the consequences are for the neighbors. We are going to have lights on 24/7 in new places. We're going to have generators running all the time because each one of these properties is going to want to have a generator. And it's just going to be a completely different experience for us, the neighbors. And I know this isn't all Winter Valley's fault, but it does impact us. It's like it's just very difficult for us. And we want to come together and have a dialogue with Winter Valley. But because of COVID, these webinars do not feel like meetings in which we get to have a back and forth dialogue. I haven't even walked the property to see what we're talking about here. So I would love to have enhanced communication around this outside of the context of the webinars. And, you know, I have some real concerns as a neighbor, but I do understand we need housing, and we particularly need housing for our elderly. So thank you all, and I'll go mute again.
Thank you, Georgia. Okay, if anyone else would like to speak, I ask that you please raise your hand. We do have one call-in number, and I'm wondering if Tim or Allison or Julia can remind us how you raise your hand if you're a caller.
I think you have to hit something on the phone.
I forget if it's *6 or *9. One of those is mute. One of those is raise hand. So I can look that up. But if the caller wants to sort of play around with that, we can probably figure out if they're raising their hand or not, and we can back into a solution. But I'm gonna look that up right now.
Okay.
I don't see any additional hands raised, but let's just give it another minute because we do have some folks. Oh, the call-in user raised their hand. Yay. Okay. Now, which it's either *9 or *6 will unmute you, caller.
Yeah, it's *6 to unmute. So if they want to.
There we go. Okay, caller, you're just going to have to turn down the volume, I think, of your computer, if you're on a computer, or maybe take yourself off speaker. If you want to try unmuting again, *6. There we go. Great. Please give us your name and address, and then feel free to share your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're referring, is it my call that you're taking?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Susan Flukes, and I live on Holmes Lane, and I am an abutter to Winter Valley. And like the previous callers, I was just made aware of this new proposal from Winter Valley, and I am opposed to changing both the bylaws and to ignoring or abrogating the agreement or the contract that Winter Valley and the town currently has with the abutters. I think that that would be a huge mistake. To change, Mr. Cochran indicated that he thought that this 32 unit building came into existence after the zoning bylaw changes. That's not the case. My understanding is that when Winter Valley was first constructed in 1979, and that was the 2-story lower buildings, that huge building was not there. And our understanding with Winter Valley was that was going to be the end of the construction. But 10 years later, in 1989, they proposed building and expanding the property. And as a result of that, the agreement that Ella has referred to came into effect. And it took quite a long time to negotiate that an agreement, and that is a contractual agreement between the town, represented by the Board of Selectmen and the Conservation Commission, and the abutters to all of the Winter Valley property. And while the 30-year period of time has expired on some of that land, and that's where they propose to put this new building, the rest of the land, some of it has perpetual restrictions of what can be done on it. So I think it's important that the town validate that and acknowledge that contract and adhere to that contract and not ignore it. And one of the elements of that contract was that Winter Valley in good faith would negotiate with the abutters, with the neighbors, if there were to be any new proposal. I noticed that Mr. Cochran mentioned a meeting or meetings that took place at Town Hall, and I'm curious whether any abutters or neighbors, and he can answer this later, were invited to that meeting and whether they participated in that meeting. I certainly was not aware that such a meeting was taking place. So in other words, this bylaw that he is proposing, that this group is proposing to change, was actually created so that Winter Valley could build that 32-story building. And I am very opposed to, I think it's a very serious matter to alter a bylaw, and I don't think I hear a significant enough reason for doing it. In other words, I think that the board should leave it the way it is, and they should, in other words, the building doesn't have to be 32 units, it can be less. So that if this roof line cannot accommodate 32, they could make fewer units. But I don't think exceeding this bylaw by jumping from 2.5 stories to 3.5 stories, from 35 feet to 48 feet, from 160 units to 190 units, and putting in this additionally large building is wise. I am also extremely concerned because I am also in a abutter to the 40B proposals that are currently roaming around town, one of which abuts my property as well. We're dealing with a developer who wants to put giant buildings. How does allowing Winter Valley to exceed and ignore a zoning article as well as a contractual agreement that they have with the abutters, how does that validate and support this agreement? And isn't that going to give fodder to this developer to look at that and say, well, they don't care about increasing the height and the size of this particular building. Why should it be an issue with these 40B proposals? I think that is a terrible precedent. I agree with the prior speakers that we are not opposed to increasing the housing, but I think it should be within the parameters of the current zoning article that exists, and I absolutely think that it should adhere to and comply with the contractual agreement that Winter Valley has with the abutters. To ignore that, I think is, it certainly would speak to the character of the town and the character of the boards if they choose to ignore that agreement. I think it would set a terrible precedent.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Flukes. Do we have any other speakers this evening? Or members of the public who wish to offer comment? I don't see any hands raised. So what I think I'll do now is recognize Ned to respond to a couple of the comments. I know you had some additional things to add.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first thing I'll do is profess I was not aware of this agreement, and I think perhaps Ms. Wells was right in that lots of faces have changed over the course of the last 30 years. So obviously, that agreement is an important document. It needs to be understood, and we need to pay attention to it and to what its requirements are, and certainly. we need to look hard at that. So I will commit to this board that we will reach out as quickly as possible to the neighbors and to others to understand more about the agreement and to engage in conversations about how to advance this project, this process going forward.
Okay. I'll open.
Can we ask a question of the representative from Winter Valley? I think it's Sarah McLaren, right? There were a couple of questions about why 36 units, and I'm wondering if she can address how they arrived at that need of 36.
Cheryl, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. The 36 actually came from discussions a while back with John, the architect, and we looked at the size of the lot and just tried to figure out a balance there. What we manage well is the 32 units in each building. We tried to balance footprint so as not to take up, not to destroy trees, but balance footprint, keeping it away from the neighbors, the building and the parking itself. And that's, we kind of gravitated towards this 36 units. It's something that we can manage without significant addition of staff. So to make it more affordable long-term, anything bigger, you would probably consider adding staff. And then anything smaller, obviously with our wait lists, we're trying to get as many units as we can that's reasonable for us. And we kind of honed in on this 36.
And what about can you comment about your mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units, how you arrived at that? And how committed you are to that mix, because that helps determine footprint as well as unit size.
So it was based on kind of current construction, what people are seeing for rental units. We don't have too many 2 bedrooms now, so we did want to add some of those. Studios are not in high demand, a lot of 1 bedrooms. So we just tried to come up with a nice mix of units.
And how about to the nature of what expectations are? We're talking about a 50% AMI building, right? So the reason I'm asking these questions is I'm trying to determine whether your 13,000, approximately 600 square footage could be reduced to address some of the impacts that people have raised concerns about. And that has to do with height. And, height is impacted by unit size and by total square footage, as John duly noted. So that's why I'm asking these questions. So if you'll indulge, thank you.
Sure. And I'm sorry, what was your last question?
Oh, it had to do with the sizes of the units, and then also how much is expected in terms of amenities. And could you put, for example, if you had a smaller upper floor, could you put all your 1 bedrooms up there and spread your 2 bedrooms out below so that you could tuck them into a roof line at the top like you have in the 32 unit building? Because we're hearing a lot of concern about height. I've expressed that concern. And I just want to understand your program a little better so I can understand where we might have some flexibility here.
There is flexibility in the units. It's my understanding that as far as keeping construction affordable, you want to kind of replicate what you have floor to floor. We're looking to create units that are perhaps a little bit bigger. And as far as I knew, there is more space requirements for the handicap accessibility. And as far as amenities, we don't have, our amenities are a single laundry room, which is located on the bottom floor, as well as a common area room. But beyond that, the amenities are very limited in that sense.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. It helps. Because If I can just go with the comment now.
Sure.
I just am not at all comfortable supporting 48 feet and 3.5 stories in height because of all the concerns people have expressed and concerns that I raised earlier, which has to do with the precedent that it sets. And I'm not convinced architecturally that it can't be done in less height. I've seen it done in less height, and it may be somewhat less than 100% ideal, but we're also talking about, impacts that neighbors aren't necessarily planning on and weren't planning on either. And so I think the scale of the building is really important, and we know this. And I did a lot of work to show on the 40Bs, the analysis to comparing scale of buildings that we have in Milton to what's being proposed. And if we're going to add large scale, then what does that say to our single family residential abutters? And so I remain quite concerned about that. And I do support additional units here. I do support the 50% AMI. I support the need of this population. So I want to see this done. That's why I had the conversation with Ned and John last week to try and nudge along this consideration of a lower height. So that's where I am on the height. I think 3 stories and 40 feet is the most that I would be comfortable with.
Okay. Do any members of the board have questions for the development team? And we should probably get those out of the way. And if not, we can close the public hearing and start our deliberation. Annie, did you have questions?
I just had thoughts of, I had submitted something earlier that I just wanted to mention, which was it would be good for the abutters in the neighborhood to kind of have a lockdown of where it would be located so that they could be sure that it wouldn't change or something. So in other words, if we approved zoning, could they then decide to change the location of the building and so forth? I came into this meeting concerned about that, but now after the agreement that was raised, I would hope that we'd all step back and a lot more outreach with that neighborhood would take place. And but I had provided some language that I had gotten from Alex as a way to lock down the actual location. But I think that discussion, I think there should be more discussion with the abutters who raised a lot of those concerns. But that language is out there if it's at all helpful once that's decided on.
Okay. Kathleen or Rich, any questions for Ned or the team?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Then what I would like to do is entertain a motion to close the public hearing on the proposed amendments to the Residence D1 zoning district.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Denny Swenson?
Yes.
Rich Beeler?
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell?
Yes.
Carol Tagayas?
Yes.
April Anderson, yes. Okay, so now we can, I'm just gonna here. Okay, so who wants to go first to share their thoughts?
One thing, since I already did share some thoughts, really, and to Denny's point, and to the issue about the side yard setback at 40 feet now, I wonder if we would want to consider having an increase in the side yard setback to make sure we did protect those 3 single families that are the closest to this development, which are off of Merwood Lane, Merwood Drive, or Can't Have Extension. So I do appreciate the fact that the additional language, Denny, in some ways addresses that. But I'd like to understand if you want to run through that language a little bit more to make sure it does address what I think it addresses.
Well, I almost think
Do it.
I almost think it's premature to lock down the location. It seems to me like the appropriate thing would be to hit pause with the planning board and have the abutters and neighborhood and MRE and Ned Corcoran, go through their process, because it seems like a step has been missed. Ned said he was not aware of the agreement. And so I think that I got ahead of things I was trying to solve a problem, but I think they have to I think they have a few things they need to work through.
So just to reiterate, this is a citizen's petition, and so the planning board has to take a vote on the citizen's petition. So, I mean, that can take any form, I suppose. We could vote to support it with an amendment. We can vote to not support it. We can vote to suggest carry forward to town meeting and try to resolve these issues for themselves. But I just want to reiterate that this is a citizen's petition and we are obligated to take a vote one way or another on the item before town meeting.
I just wanted to clarify though, a lot of what was discussed in terms of process, and I didn't get a chance to read those agreements this afternoon, but would be covered in our special permit process, as long as, but if we didn't otherwise the zoning currently would allow a building within 40 feet of side yard, right? I mean, so all the other aspects of planning, like if it allows a maximum of 36 units, but can't meet height or setback requirements and fitting it in the parking and the Concom, then that might dictate the number of units. From what I heard was the initial analysis was done as a test fit to see what they thought would fit. And it's a maximum number from an operational point of view. It's not necessarily final because it hasn't been worked through in a level of detail yet. And that level of detail would come through a special permit, which is a process which all the neighbors would participate in. Side agreements with the select board in our zoning permitting processes is not something that's done commonly. I know it was something that was kind of worked out at Wolcott Woods, but the planning board at the time was uncomfortable having zoning written basically elsewhere and handed over to the planning board to certify, if you will, or bless, and then could have locked into that. I mean, it's not the normal or typical way to do planning, and I appreciate the neighbors' concerns, but my point about this is that it would come through a special permit process. And Kathleen, I don't know if you have anything further to sort of add to that in terms of process.
I do. I mean, I read the agreement and it's 1989. It's not recorded at the Registry of Deeds. It speaks to the specific project, which was the construction of a building in 1989. I'll have to read it again, but I didn't see anything in there that says that it lasts for forever. That it's talking about a specific project, which was the building at that time. But going to Cheryl's point, I don't see how, if the citizens petition goes through and passes, I don't see, they still have to come before, they have to get site plan approval or something, don't they? They don't get to do this as a right.
It's special permit of the Board of Appeals.
Okay, so there is a process, as Cheryl mentioned, for the discussion of the building, the site location, the design, the setbacks, landscape screening, all that sort of stuff being done before the Board of Appeals. So it's not like you just sort of give them this zoning change and they could put the shovel in the ground. The ZBA will be dealing with it. I also think it's not exactly fair to combine Winter Valley seeking one more building with all the 40B applications that we currently have in this town. It's a different process. It's a different situation. None of the projects that are being offered to the town have 50% AMI. They're only providing the absolute minimum of the statute, which is 25% at 80% AMI.
Mhm.
So Winter Valley is actually addressing a need that we clearly have, and has a waiting list that's ridiculous. And so, to me, it's I can see the height situation, and perhaps there's a way to get around that. But you also have to figure out, how is it financeable? I mean, they got to borrow money to build this. And so how, if we put in too many requirements or too many restrictions or something like that, how are they ever going to be able to go out and get the money to build it? So my inclination is to go ahead and let town meeting decide whether or not it's a citizen's petition anyway, and let town meeting decide. And then it would be going before the ZBA with their own discussion about how the conditions should be imposed. That's my thought.
Okay. Rich, do you have comments?
Oh, sorry, there's noise in the background. I do. I was going to say no. I do. I mean, I think I'm in agreement with just about everything that I'm hearing. My problem is I'm trying to summarize it in my own thoughts, and like there's still, I think I'm like where Denny is, and I don't want to speak for you, Denny, but my feeling is like everyone at least what I'm hearing from folks is they have issues with the height or certain other things. My problem is I don't know that I agree with the moving it forward to vote at town meeting when it's kind of our job to talk through these things, and I mean, it's got to pass a certain amount of muster to get there, in my opinion. And if we have
If it's
issues
a
with
citizen's petition, it goes whether we want it or not.
Okay, right, but we should have an opinion on it, and it's our job to do our due diligence so that when town meeting reads it, they're thinking, okay, so it's passed the muster of planning board, fantastic. And so that they by and large, I'm not saying that all 300 plus folks are not going to read it thoroughly, but it's our job to read it thoroughly and to give that opinion. And so in my opinion, sorry, a lot of opinions, in my opinion, it hasn't passed that. I think there's probably sounds like there's some gray area in some of those neighborhood conversations and things like that. I'd like to see more about that. I haven't read it fully either. It sounds like you did, Kathleen. So that, I'm not going to deny that makes sense, but there's enough issues with everything else for me to say, hey, let's push this forward. I wouldn't want town meeting to come thinking that I personally thought it was a great project, as is. Because I do agree with others that had said, Cheryl made a good comment about, probably support a good building there. Makes sense.
I think it would have a better chance if the citizen petitioners took some time to work these kinks out and work with that neighborhood. They seem, from what I'm hearing from the citizens who spoke, they agree with the principles that we all care about and agree on, that we would like to see more senior affordable units there. I'm sorry if I cut you off, Rich. But
no, not at all.
Yeah, I just coming to this meeting, I wasn't at my desk for the hours leading up to it. So I had not seen these documents. I have not read these documents. I in good conscience, I would have to abstain from voting because I don't feel I have the information to make an informed decision because I did not have these materials. And Ned said he was not aware of the agreement. I'm not aware of the agreement. I don't know what it means. So I would feel that the best thing for me to do would be to abstain from a vote. If you want to carry on with the votes, I leave it to each of you to decide what your consciences want.
So I have a potential suggestion.
Mhm.
We have a meeting scheduled before town meeting. Is it possible to defer a decision because it's not going to be printed? I guess we'll have to get a decision to warrant committee. But my thought is there's at least 3 of us who said we haven't been able to read the documents that arrived this afternoon. And Ned said he hadn't either. I mean, and Kathleen has, and I respect Kathleen's opinion.
But I read it fast, so, you know,
Yeah.
I could always read it again, so.
And I guess my assumption was, as I said earlier, was that the issues that are were addressed in that would be addressed during a special permit process, but I'd like to make sure that that's the case. Because otherwise what I would suggest is that we put in a setback requirement that's at least adequate to what has been shown us to date at 54 feet rather than the 40. And Ned did mention to us before, and I know we closed the hearing, but maybe he could just confirm it, that he had spoken with those 3 direct abutters that are closest to the building. And that I think would be Yandel, Janiga, and Wernefeld. And I think because the building's closest to them, and we didn't hear from them, that confirmation that they would be comfortable with the distance of the building and the height of the building from their properties. And so I'm guessing that we could have some of that information before town meeting at our pre-town meeting.
So Tim, do you have a feeling about this?
About what in particular?
The process, can they vote before town meeting? Or I think the warrant committee might be waiting to hear from us, but I don't know how urgent that is.
Yeah, I don't really have any kind of special insight into the machinations of town meeting and the warrant committee on that. So I don't.
So maybe we have to meet like an hour before. Sorry, April.
Well, I have a suggestion. Why wouldn't we just say that we're not in a position to take a vote on it? Can we do that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
It was my understanding from Tim previously, but I could have gotten this wrong. Let's hear it from him directly, that we are required to vote on a citizen's petition on zoning. But Tim, you can do that for me or for us.
I don't know. I don't, April, I'm sorry. I don't know what the requirement. I don't know if Kathleen has some insight there.
I know exactly where to look. Just wait.
Couldn't our vote be to not have an opinion?
Well, remember, there's at times when like the warrant committee votes not to have an opinion until they get additional information. And sometimes it's at the last minute. And that's why Rich, you and I were on the warrant committee for 4 years. So
that's what I was thinking. We've done that before.
Same thing.
Right. We've done that before where we voted not to. We've had the same exact discussion. I wish I remember the exact words we used.
Well, I think, there's an opportunity to have the answers to some of the information, I think, at least with respect to the agreements, right? Because, and understanding the process. And then it's just, I think that seems to be what people have the most concern about, right? That we just saw these agreements and we want to make sure we understand the process. Otherwise, I think that the answer, we have to ask ourselves, do we support additional units at Winter Valley? I think I heard all the neighbors say they do. And we have said we do. We know there's a need. They're addressing a population that's not addressed in other developments. And Ned provided additional information about that, about the diversity tonight, which is also something that we weren't aware of, I think, before. The 50% AMI, as was noted, doesn't come in 40B projects. This is HUD finance. So this is like a rare opportunity to add this type of housing. So, my concern previously around the height, I think can be solved architecturally. So I think they can solve that with what I suggested before. And then this concern about making sure that it's adequate distance from the property line, given there's no front yard and it's only side yards, the closest neighbors are kind of like the front yard. And so if we increase that a bit, I think it addresses those most directly impacted. So my concern really is just to make sure we understand and give due process to having just received these agreements and understanding how the special permit process would work. But otherwise, I'm absolutely in favor of what this is trying to accomplish.
So I just want to make sure the attendees know that we've closed the public hearing, so I can't take additional comment. I do see a hand raised. My feeling about this is I actually just looked at the email between Tim and Kevin Freitag. Tim, I was able to find it, and he actually doesn't say that we need to vote on the article. He just says that we need to have a public hearing on the article. So I think the suggestion to wait and address it immediately before town meeting so that there's at least an opinion of the board on record is a good one, because I don't think we're in a position to vote tonight. And I apologize. I had to regroup around that email to see what our requirements were. My personal feelings about this are similar to what Cheryl just described. I mean, I have talked about the housing production plan and its data around seniors and the demand for affordable units and physically challenged individuals. In the last housing production plan said that there were 123 senior Milton residents, not just seniors, but Milton residents that are either physically challenged or seniors that are on wait lists for affordable housing units. And there's 1 to 2 available a year. So the demand for this housing is extremely high.
Right.
Also pulled together a spreadsheet previously and shared it with the board that shows how well we've done on the production of affordable units over the 18 years from 2002's housing production plan to 2020's plan. And we went from somewhere like 4.2% on the SHI, the subsidized housing inventory, to 4.9%. So over 18 years, we made progress. And I think that we really need to, as a community, start thinking long and hard about this. We have 9 40Bs pending, and that's the consequence of inaction. So I know that with every project, everybody, has a tendency to say, wait a minute, let's slow things down and let's really think about this. I mean, I think we need to think about it in the macro, which is we have an existing affordable housing project that has created no problems for the community. Some people may not like the way some of the buildings look. You can hardly see them, certainly from the street. And when we're talking about what the alternative is of inaction, it's members of our own community who are seniors who don't have a place to live and can't stay in our community. I think that's a pretty severe consequence. The second is, if we don't make some serious progress on affordability, we're going to be in this boat forever. And yes, we need to create 500-ish units. I don't even know if the totality of what's proposed across these 9 projects even gets us there. And
well, it gets us to a safe harbor if we approve 1 or 2 of them anyway.
But I guess my point is, Kathleen, to suggest, now we're out of the woods because a couple of what happened is foolish. And I think the community needs to recognize that. So I understand that there's concerns. I understand that anything happening in anyone's neighborhood, my own included, makes people nervous. But I think when we're talking about the potential impacts of a project, this is on the lowest end. And I've said before about other things like accessory dwelling units. I mean, we have to really think about this. And so I would strongly favor moving this, the board vote, if the board, the 4 of you, I mean, I'm going to respect the fact I won't be on the board for town meeting. If the 4 of you feel as though you should wait until the 3rd of May to take a vote on this or to regroup around some additional information, I totally respect that and I support it. But I would very much like to see this article move forward so the project can move forward. And if that means adding language on the floor, which hopefully could be worked out in advance, I think the folks at Winter Valley are very reasonable and want to see something happen. If adjusting the height, and if that means adjusting the unit count is what needs to happen, then let's do it. I mean, this is a good project. This is a good proposal and it helps a lot of very good people in our community stay here. So that's my opinion. Would you guys like to or not do nothing and just agree to defer?
Can I just put?
Oh, I'm sorry, Denny. Yes, I have my.
I just wanted to put one more, which is actually 2 more concerns that I would love to have addressed at some point. I wish I had asked this before we closed the public hearing, because I don't have a sense of whether or not the Conservation Commission has been able to weigh in properly and get their issues addressed, because there is some there are some wetlands right there. And then
Denny, I don't think they will until they actually get an application.
Yeah, to file an application first.
okay. It's just that it seems like there are 3 agreements and one has to do with conservation land, blah, 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 blah. So it seems like it's a little bit, but okay. And then the other thing that I picked up on was the citizens said, one of the 3 citizens said that they may prefer a wider footprint to higher up. So I think there's a little bit of room to explore. I don't know what that actually does to the rest, to other, sometimes you change one thing and you open another can of worms, but just, maybe a few less units, maybe elongate a little here or there. Maybe there are some solutions that could work.
So Denny, can I just add a comment to that? That's where it's important to understand all of the dimensional criteria, like the 100-foot buffer and the setbacks, because dropping the height would make a bigger footprint, but that might make a bigger impact on the 3 direct abutters because it's a longer walls, if you will. And, they're the only ones. The other abutting property is Milton Hospital. It's those 3 direct abutters that Ned mentioned at the outset that are the only 3 single-family residential direct abutters. And so I think it's really important to remember that because it's their backyards and they're also, the ones who are close to 652 Canton Ave and 648 Canton Ave. But my point is, if as was represented to us before, that the Yandles, who are the ones where the building would be closest to them, were comfortable with the general site layout and with a 54-foot building in a corner of it away. I'd hate to drop height and expand footprint. So I would rather make sure that dimension doesn't get any bigger. So, and I think that they can fit their units within that height if we go to the 40 feet. 35 might be hard to do the units in that height, but 40 feet. So 40 and 48, 8 feet is a lot in terms of height and volume, and in terms of what it does for precedent. 2.5 to 3, to me, it's not significant. We have 2.5 zoning a lot, but we also have 3-story houses in our historic houses. And we have houses like at 582 Blue Hill Ave that are 11,000 square feet. So this isn't much bigger than that house in terms of total square footage. It's a big house, 11,000 and 13,000 square feet, would be a big house, but it's not unprecedented, right?
No, unfortunately not.
So to me, it's like making sure that there's an adequate buffer of the building to those 3 direct abutters. And if it means maybe they go a little bit into the 100-foot buffer zone, or maybe they go closer to the hospital property, which, is going to be redeveloped itself. And really, like as I mentioned before, I've walked through Winter Valley several times, and I've done that recently, considering like what the impacts might be of this development. And this is just so far back that really, even the 32 unit building is so far back. My feeling is it's those 3 direct abutters that are the only ones who are going to see it until something's built on the hospital property. Unless you really go up there and take a walk up there or drive up there. So, I said that earlier, because people had concerns that give us an opportunity, but I do think it's important for us to weigh in for town meeting. And I agree a lot with what April had to say. And if April wants to have an opportunity to have a vote on this, I would be okay to do that tonight. But I do have confidence that the the special permit process could work its way through in a similar way to those agreements that were referred to earlier in terms of site plan, building design, landscaping, placement of parking, all of that would get done in that process. So it wouldn't be missed.
I
But I
just
thought it
wanted
would go to the ZBA. I thought it
Yeah.
didn't come to us. I thought it went to the ZBA.
it
I
does.
think I said through special permit process, but at the ZBA, I guess my experience has been that they, outside of the, I mean, even with the 40B process, they look to the planning board for our guidance in reviewing projects.
So my comment on that, which I forgot to mention at the agreement, I think going through the Board of Appeals is actually a great place for that to be sorted out, because if there is an agreement with, I mean, that the Board of Appeals is made up of all parents. So if there's a legal agreement with some standing, it doesn't matter if we have zoning, that they won't be able to permit the project. Similarly, if there's some sort of violation of a conservation restriction, the project can't be permitted. I mean, wetlands, the state supersedes our rules anyway, so we can't, just because we provide zoning doesn't necessarily mean that the project can move forward if it's in conflict with either a legal agreement that has standing or some sort of other regulatory requirement around conservation. So that's why I know that this is not as fully vetted as we would normally go through a process. I think the change is actually quite modest to existing zoning. And I think the public benefit is so overriding, which is why, and I do feel like there are safeguards with these other regulatory systems with the conservation, and 3 lawyers will be on the panel deciding whether or not any sort of agreement has standing. And I think that will correct for all of these things.
Just a comment. So my feeling is this. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. My only alternate feeling though is that, like, I'm not quite sure what the need for the speed of this is, and I feel like my feeling of not wanting to jump the gun, but I also feel that, like everything you said, like I want to see something happen. I do care about affordable housing, and I mean, this sounds like a great project, but the reality is for me, I'm not feeling good about why we would need to hurry. Like, not wanting to hurry up is not me saying I don't agree with everything else you just said, I guess is my point. And so I'm not sure. And again, I'm still not seeing why we would need to hurry up. I mean, we just got this not long ago, and we're supposed to, we are, in my opinion, supposed to vet it out. And yes, it would go to the ZBA, but, they're not, an elected board, right? Yeah, there are 3 lawyers that probably definitely know what they're doing, but they aren't an elected board. And this is the elected board that, gets to vet it out in a very different way. So anyway, I am in the same boat as Danny. I don't remember what you said about the voting, but you guys sure have every right to vote, but I would abstain. I think I'm not sure I see the need for the speed of this, of us pushing this forward and agreeing with it when it still needs to be vetted out more. I mean, it sure is going to still go to town meeting, but I don't want anybody at town meeting to get the wrong impression that we've vetted this out and agree with on the merits of what they brought forward now. I mean, there's just too many outstanding things in my opinion.
Allison,
Well,
something to say? Oh, I'm sorry, Kathleen, go ahead. And then
I just wanted to remind people of the history of this, is that Winter Valley was originally going to go to the zoning board and request a variance. And that's how this started, is that they decided the restriction on the open space on this parcel expired in 2019, and they now have the ability to add another building. So the idea was they would go before the ZBA for a variance. The issue with the variance is that all of the abutters have to get notice. And now the abutters include the Tamposies. So they would have the ability to show up at the variance hearing before the ZBA and just lob an objection. Nobody's entitled to a variance legally. And so there was a last minute change in tactic, which is why this is a last minute change in tactic. To avoid the variance problem, they decided to go in for the zoning change. So that's the reason for why this kind of came out. It seems like it came out of the blue. It's because it was a change in the tactic. Because their original proposal was just to go to the ZBA for a variance. And they realized with all the nonsense going on with the Canton Ave property that was probably not going to be a successful idea. They could always go back to plan 1 and do a variance application with the ZBA. So that just sort of, I just sort of wanted to say that it wasn't as if people were, coming out with this, as a sneak around sort of thing and had been planning this behind people's backs. It was a change in tactic due to the circumstances with the abutters and the variance.
And I just want to say one point about the rush of it all. And again.
Well, because it has to be done at town meeting and we only hold 2 of them. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think Rich's point was sort of like, why can't we wait till the fall or somewhere down the line? Which I think is valid and I understand completely. My feeling about it is that I think passing zoning like this actually helps the town with regard to the 40Bs because we are miles away from 10%. A lot of the decisions that are made at the state level are discretionary, and we are not anywhere near a sympathetic petitioner in any of these appeals that may or may not be filed. And as you can see, all of our comments to the site eligibility letters and everything else are just literally being ignored, I think because the impression of and thinks we're above our 10% requirement. And frankly, the evidence suggests that. And so for me, I think that passing a zoning ordinance like this quickly demonstrates to the state that we are not objectionable to affordable housing. We're not fighting affordable housing. We just want to do it in a different way. And we don't think all of those projects make sense for the town and at the scale that they're suggested. The other point I want to make is we've had a couple of bumps and bruises as a board over the last year with potential rezoning discussions. And the overarching objection was, how dare you suggest zoning that's going to impact the entire town? This zoning in Milton should happen more, in more site-specific fashion. This is exactly that. I mean, this is what people are asking for. It's a very specific zoning article to create one additional building for a very specific population in one location that we already have developed. So we know what the consequence of development there is. We've seen it. It's an operational project. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm not uncomfortable with the idea that we move forward with an article like this, because it's already an existing location. It's just more units there. And it seems consistent with what we heard from several other people who came to our condo conversion meetings, objection to the wider spread, broader zoning strategy. Well, this is going back to the site-specific zoning strategy. So I think it's worthy of consideration. But as far as the vote, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add to what you said, or play off of what you said there, April. If we think about the 40B on Randolph Ave that just came in, and we think about Ice House, we're looking at a large number of market rate units to achieve a relatively small number of affordable units, because those are for sale, not their rental. And so here you have opportunity for 36 units, and 36 units in the 40B is just a much, much bigger development, right? I mean, that's the number of units that you get with one of these massive Tamposi proposals. And, in conversations with some of, the neighbors, and some of these are my neighbors, people would rather see something that they have some way to have meaningful input into than and contribute to safe harbor than continue to be bombarded with 40Bs. And so, 36 affordable units here, could, with perhaps some of the other units that are coming on through Pulte and through Wolcott Woods, and maybe one of the 40Bs would be a safe harbor opportunity. So I do think we have to keep this in the broader context, like you said, April. It's not just, looking at this as an isolated thing. It's in the context of achieving a real need and also helping us with these 40B projects. And that's the way people view it too.
I'm not disagreeing with anything you folks are saying. It's just Cheryl, you or somebody said a few minutes ago, like the butters that are next to it, we'd like to hear from them. I mean, we opened and closed the meeting after a couple hours, and we don't know what those folks' thoughts are. And there are things in here I thought I heard each one of you say that you were very uncomfortable with. So the part that I don't agree with is I don't agree with the comment about, so the town didn't want town-wide solutions. We want more individual. I don't like that. See, and I was very much in disagreement with that before. I do think we should share it as a town. And, I don't feel good about rushing this through when we haven't heard from some of those abutters that it would directly impact just because of the greater good for the town. That doesn't sit well with me. And I know that's not really what you're meaning here, but I don't know. Again, I mean, it's 5-member board. If you want to vote for it, you can. I'm just saying I am going to abstain as well, because I think this was a very rushed public hearing, and we do not have all the information from the abutters, and there is definitely enough things in here that I was concerned with and that I heard tonight. So that's, but I mean, you guys are saying the same things over and over, and I agree with all of them. I just think if we had the rest of the information and the developers changed some of the things that we were concerned about, sure, it sounds great. Let's say, I would say yes. And I don't think we're voting on it, right? To say, hey, it's going to happen, right? It's just going to town meeting and we're giving our opinion, I believe, in some way, shape, or form. And my opinion is just, I don't have enough information yet. So I'd be abstaining.
Rich, for the things that I mentioned I would be concerned with, I would say that they would be amendments that, I would or the board could propose in terms of adding a setback requirement and reducing the height request requirement. I wouldn't support the way it is.
So my suggestion to you, then, if you vote yes, and that you want to, and it sounds like you have the votes anyway, if you are going to do it, I highly suggest you put your comments in for the warrant committee so that they can include them, so the town meeting understands what your thoughts were, because not everybody's going to watch this meeting tonight and actually even know.
Allison had her hand raised for a while. I just want to make sure. Allison, did you have something more you wanted to add?
I actually had like a clarifying question for either Sarah or Ned. Understanding that this is a subsidized project and that you'll be requesting HUD funding, are you going to be, HUD typically funds, projects that are more towards shovel ready. So is there a timeline as to when they would be looking to apply to HUD for funding?
Well, I mean, there is there's always that list of, when the applications have to be in. I don't think that they're even close enough for that part.
Right.
And they can't answer the question because we closed the public hearing.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But they, they would have to have their zoning before they could even finalize their best in finalizing their drawings and
have to do the application. You have to make sure that you are, they can't file the application now. They don't have site, approval.
Right. I just was curious to know if there was a timeline that they were trying to meet, but I can follow up with them.
Yeah.
I will leave it open to you four. I mean, I appreciate Cheryl suggesting that if I had a deep inclination to vote on this, that we do it tonight. I of course, I think you all know how I feel about it, but I don't have a strong opinion about voting. I'm happy to just suggest that we defer this for further discussion on May 3rd, at your meeting on May 3rd, if you wish to.
Well, I don't know that we're going to have any more information in a week, personally. and to address, to address the concerns that have been raised. So my sort of inclination is to take a vote now, and I don't really understand the idea of abstaining. You guys should, if people don't want to go forward, they should just vote no. Do we never vote no, or we just abstain?
No, it's completely appropriate to abstain when you don't have enough information to make an informed decision.
No.
Kathleen, it's completely appropriate. It's not, when you do not have enough information to make an informed decision and it's a reasonable information request, it's perfectly appropriate to abstain.
So I said, I don't understand I just don't understand the purpose. If I didn't want to go
because
forward,
I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to the principles. I don't have the information to make the, I don't, and based on the information, my vote may go one way or the other way, but as it stands right now, I don't have that information.
Okay. I just was curious.
Okay. Well, you sounded a little personal there, so.
No. I was just curious. As I said,
Well,
it was just
I'm glad to hear it wasn't personal. I really am.
No, not at all.
Good.
All right,
That's
so
good. Thank you.
I'm just wondering. That's all.
Very good. We need family counseling again.
We're gonna miss April.
I quit. No. Okay, so what do we want to do? I mean, I think it's split. Yes, I could make the decision. Did you have something more to add on this, Cheryl? I don't really feel
I just, it's more of a process question. On the amendments, how does that actually work? So we would make a proposed that we support it with the proviso that it be changed, or I'm just like the logistics of it, the process.
Well, so that's why I mean, frankly, if I was going to be on the board, I would suggest that we talk about it again on May 3rd, simply because it does give a week. Now the proponents have heard where the planning board comes down. And I do think that if you have a citizen zoning petition without planning board support on the floor of town meeting, you're going to struggle, regardless of what the intention is or any sort of public benefit. So what I would assume would happen is that after this meeting, if we don't vote, Tim will hear from Ned or Sarah or someone to talk about what amendments might be recommended to bring to the board for consideration on May 3rd. And then there would be, I suggest, a floor amendment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I think we need to check with Kevin Freitag to see, okay, how does that process work? We could delay our vote tonight until the night of town meeting. Or we could take a vote tonight that says that we would be willing to, we are in general support of the article, but would require amendments. And that's our report. I don't know that we need to do anything more than that. We don't need to vote yes or no on the article itself. We just have to provide a report.
All right,
And
well
so
then
our
I would
report
definitely,
our
go ahead, I'm
report
sorry.
would be, so, the motion could be, we are in general support of the additional units at Winter Valley. But we feel that the zoning amendment needs additional work, and that's our report to town meeting.
So I have another question. Would the citizens who drafted the petition be able to offer their own amendments?
Yeah.
Yes.
As a floor amendment, anybody can.
Yeah, so anybody can on the floor, but I thought during these remote meetings, he wanted amendments 3 days in advance. Is that right? The town.
He sort of does. But I think that's an honest reflection of the way we feel, which is we're in general support of additional units at Winter Valley, but don't feel that the article in its present form is ready for prime time.
But would we say, if that's the case, Kathleen, would we say that the planning board will offer amendments either before or on the floor of town meeting? So it's
I don't know.
Because otherwise we say it's generally supportive. What does that mean? We vote yes or no? Like the Moore Committee, like, I don't know what it says. Like,
I think two things. Can I just say, if we take a vote and if I read the tea leaves, let's just hypothetically say it's 3 people in favor, 2 people abstain. I think that sends a message to town meeting that there's something wrong or there's real division here. I think if you wait until Monday, or if you do what Kathleen suggested and you say we're in general favor, but it's not ready for prime time, I think that sends like, I mean, if I'm a town meeting member, which I am, I'm going to say not ready for prime time. Yeah, I'm not ready for voting. You know, why is it here? Is what I'm thinking as a town meeting member. What are we doing? How come? So I think the best shot at success on this is to give the parties an opportunity to address a lot of the concerns that we came up with. And if they do, then we can possibly make a positive push forward. And if they don't, then we can say it's still not ready for prime time and it's not our fault. It's not, we're not the citizens. We're not the petition this. This isn't on us. We're giving them an opportunity. But I think either way, if we vote tonight, it's not ideal.
So I tend to agree with you, Denny. Everything.
Thank you.
And honestly, I very much support this proposal, but I think it's the burden of the Winter Valley team to listen to what was said. It's the same comments that we made 2 meetings ago and last meeting.
Yeah, I don't want us to be doing the amendments to the article.
Potential, if they're willing, some potential edit to the board.
Yeah.
And if they want to talk to Cheryl outside the meeting again about architectural issues, great. If they want to talk to Tim and Allison, fine. But then if they don't do that, you can choose to vote on the 3rd or you don't. But at least it gives a little bit time for them to propose something that you may want to consider. And Rich, I'm not ignoring your comment. You may still feel on May 3rd that you haven't had enough opportunity to engage publicly, and that's okay too. But I just think voting tonight, I mean, we could vote and say we appreciate the spirit of what's being proposed and we support more affordable housing for seniors. But again, like to Denny's point, I don't know that that accomplishes a whole lot.
Yeah, I agree with Denny. That's right. So yeah, so as I said, so then why don't we just sort of hold off? But I don't think we should be drafting their amendments to their zoning.
That's fair.
Okay.
Okay, so we need to take
So we have consensus.
Ta-da! Kathleen, we did it.
Rich, are you okay talking about it again on May 3rd and seeing what?
Yeah, definitely.
So my question is, do you think half an hour in advance, do we anticipate that the Winter Valley team will want to come? That's my only question. We might need a little more time, but.
You might need more time, and also you might be talking about some of these 40B letters. So maybe make that an hour before town meeting, and if you don't need the time, I mean, you're already home. It's not like you're sitting in town hall or something, you know, if you don't.
Yeah, we could just recess if we don't need it and just reconvene it. We used to reconvene on the floor, right? So you could just recess until 7:30 if we don't need the whole. I'd rather have the time set aside if we need to hear from them and have more debate about it and not be rushed.
So does that make sense to everybody? 6:30 then, meeting of the planning board on May 3rd. And if you don't need the time, you don't need the time. If you do need the time, you have it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rich, does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, Julia, you got that? Allison and Tim?
Can I just ask for one other thing?
Got it.
Thank you.
So since this isn't sponsored by the planning board, does this mean it requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting? Since it's a citizen's petition and a zoning change? I read the guidance and it wasn't clear to me that they addressed citizens petitions.
I think it's the quantum of vote, however it shows up.
Oh, all right. Because the way I read it is like subparagraph F, I guess, 2F says that permits, so if the zoning change permits an increase in the permissible density of population or intensity of a particular use in a proposed multifamily or mixed use development that requires a special permit. So it seems to me it applies, that this amendment applies in that particular category. Mm-hmm. So I think we would need to be clear, somebody needs to be clear, and it says in here that the planning board puts in their report to the town meeting what we think it is. And so I just want to make sure we don't forget that. And whether we do that tonight or we do that on the 3rd, somebody take note that I think we do need to do it.
Yeah, so
If I read this correctly.
Tim, you should consult Kevin Freitag on that.
Will do.
Okay. And you understand that that's something where we would have to report to the moderator if it requires a simple majority, if the planning board believes it does.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have no action here because we've already voted to close the public hearing. So what we will do now is defer further discussion on this article to 6:30 p.m. on May 3rd. Okay, now there's 2 other items or 3 other items, and we'll move through them quick because I know we weren't supposed to meet for a long time tonight. The 728 Randolph Avenue site eligibility letter. I don't know. Kathleen, did we ask you to write that?
No, not yet.
Okay. So where are we on this? Has everybody reviewed the project and do we have points to discuss tonight?
I reviewed it.
Hmm?
I reviewed what little there is there. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
unbelievable to me. I do have some things I'd like to raise about it, but I don't have to go first.
Well, Tim, when is this letter due?
So the deadline for just so everyone kind of remembers, I know we've done this a dozen times, but just to refresh everybody, it's the select board that's writing a comment letter to Mass Housing to aid in their deliberations about whether or not to approve the site for a comprehensive or whatever. So what the planning board would be doing is sending their comments to the select board, and the select board would be integrating the planning board's comments into their own comments, including comments from the public, comments from myself and other department heads, et cetera, et cetera. So the due date to get a letter to Mass Housing is June 6th. I had asked the other department heads to get me their comments, if there are any comments, by the end of this week, so that I could draft something, to give to the select board next week so that they could have at least a week or two, understanding that we lose a week for town meeting, to kind of, get some public comment and take those into account. So, there's no real deadline for the planning board. As a practical matter, you would be sending a letter to me and I would be sending a draft to the select board. All that being said, if you do want to have something in writing, which I think the board has had something in writing for the previous projects, the sooner the better would be nice.
Well, we don't have the site visit until Friday.
That's correct.
Well,
I wouldn't be drafting anything until after I'd already walked the site.
right.
And all of our previous ones, we have done a letter addressed to the Board of Selectmen, a
Right.
formal letter to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
And we've asked for them to, when we've done graphic analysis, we've asked them to include that in their letter.
Yeah, as an attachment.
Yeah. I mean, if I may just run through a few things that I think are important before
Yeah.
the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
In looking at the application where it's asked if there are any significant areas of ledge or topographic change, they said no. And when you look at the survey, you'll see that there's topographic change from the sidewalk. The elevation is 104 and it rises to as much as 130. So that's 26 feet of topographic change on 1.6 acres. I would say that's significant topographic change.
Mm-hmm.
And ledge, there's a number of areas of ledge called out, including where they're proposing to put the building in a Coltech system.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, it's like, it begs the question of, how does this work with, water management and so forth? But there is ledge and there is significant topographic change, and they don't have any drawings that show anything, so it's hard to understand it. There's no sections. If you drew a section that went from the street and showed, it rises up and then it drops back off towards the golf course or the access road. And so it says the building is, I think, 40 feet tall, it says, but the garage floor elevation is at 115, and the grade at the access roadside is 110. So the garage floor is 5 feet above grade outside. So just kind of understanding the building. Again, we don't have any information to understand the building. There's no dimensions on the site plan. There are no architectural plans. There's no dimensions on the building elevation, the one elevation that they did provide. And so I just think it's really hard to understand how this thing, works on the site, given those things. And then just from the actual site location, it says that there's a bus stop on Randolph Ave, but
We've been through that with the last 40B. There isn't a bus stop.
Yeah, so it doesn't, and it says, and all of the boxes to check, like why you would say, yeah, this would be a great project. They're all no on their application. So it's like,
no, they admit. I mean, at least they're better than the other one because they admit that it doesn't.
They admit there's nothing good about it. And then just like again, to my point about you don't know how big the building is because there's no dimensions. Well, it says the total gross square footage is 689,075. Now that's a pretty big high rise downtown at that square footage. I mean, it's probably, maybe they're talking about 68,900 or something. But I mean, it's just like, you can't even understand just what this project is, I guess, is in many ways that, and then other things in it. They say that their acquisition for buildings is 13 million, but then it's actually that their construction cost is 13 million. And then they have $0 for architecture and $0 for permits. The whole pro forma doesn't make any sense. I mean, nothing about this application makes any sense. This would be like laughed at. I don't understand it, I guess.
Cheryl, can I make two clarifying comments?
Okay.
One of which you're absolutely right about, they do say that, yes, the site does include significant areas of ledge or steep slopes. So they don't deny that. You are right, though, that that answer doesn't really capture how significant the ledge is and how steep the slopes are. And the 240 bus does stop at the bottom of the dump road inbound to Ashmont. I know with the 7-Eleven project, I know there was some commentary and discussion about the BAT bus as well, and it was kind of the wrong direction, and how would you cross over to the inbound side? This is on the inbound side, and there is a 240 stop over there. So I think that's, take it for what it is. It's the 240 bus.
What should we do for a process moving forward? Do you want to go on the sidewalk on Friday? And then maybe Kathleen, if she's willing, can draft up sort of a draft letter that everybody can contribute to, and maybe at one of the meetings before town meeting next week, it can be discussed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was surprised that it was that location. Didn't you approve zoning for an elderly project for the horse farm, like right behind it?
They came in and had informational meetings, but they were hilarious. Remember those?
Yes.
But we didn't approve anything because it was.
Well, I had a client who had agreement with them to sell his house.
I can't remember which presentations those were, Denny, but I do remember one that included 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper taped together.
Okay,
they were
good.
on the site plan. So I'm not sure how sophisticated the proposal was. And I do know that there was some sort of zone considered, whether it was passed or not, I don't recall, for the dump property itself, but I don't think it was this parcel included.
No, I thought it was the horse.
So the assisted living residential development zoning was passed for the horse farm. That owner unfortunately died recently. And so I don't know if that zoning is a couple of years old as well. And I know they made a couple kind of goes at it. But this is, again, this is, you're right. It's kind of right next door. So it's between the golf course, the animal shelter, the horse farm. And, this is actually incidentally the developer that did the Jill Kathleen Way subdivision around the corner.
Huh.
Yeah.
So it's familiar. Okay, so what I would propose, Kathleen, are you willing to do a first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So why don't the board members who are able to participate in the site walk go ahead? Maybe if anybody wants to share bullets or anything with Kathleen, you can do that. And she can pull together a draft letter that can be discussed at one of the pre-town meetings.
Yeah, I mean, so far I don't have a whole lot of, I looked at it and, it's basically a 40B application on the back of a napkin, but
you're giving it more credit than I would.
yeah. So, and it may be just, it's there so that they can, because they know if you were at all interested in doing a 40B, one or two of these that are before us are probably going to be approved. Even if they're appealed, those will count for a safe harbor. So it will at least have a year on one or with one or two of these approvals, even if nothing gets built for a while. So if you were inclined, I think they might have jumped in because they were worried about being locked out for a few years.
It also could just be a negotiation strategy.
Yeah.
But
Peter Freeman's representing them, and he's the one who's representing the East Milton folks.
Speaking of East Milton, can I just make a comment?
Mm-hmm.
I tuned in last week to the hearing on the East Milton one, and Jen Corcoran was the lead presenter and speaker, and as owner and developer, much more keenly involved in the project, at least in the interactions with the ZBA, than the Tamposis have been. And my sense is that, there's different kinds of developers who are proposing these 40Bs, and some may or may not be more or less willing to work with the town. I don't know anything about this particular developer who is doing the one on Randolph Ave, but
there are a lot more. Oh, yeah.
In the past, the select board has reached out and asked for a meeting with folks, and I participated in some of the early ones when I was chair. And, you could get a sense of which ones, like Ice House, where they were going to respond to concerns before they actually filed with the ZBA. So I guess my suggestion to Tim is to try and see if you can get a meeting, if it hasn't already been requested, with this developer, and see if there's room to work with them on crafting something that might be something that could be supported rather than not, I guess, since we do need the units. And engaging with a developer who's interested in engaging is would be refreshing, I guess.
Okay, so I think we have a plan for what to do here. So unless anybody else has anything to add on this site eligibility letter, then let's move on to the discussion of changes to earth materials removal and deposit of fill amendment. Tim, do you want to bring us up to speed here?
Yeah. Maybe send someone else to the warrant committee next time. I don't know.
Is quite the preface, I must add.
Well, so Kevin Freitag, town council, had the backstory here, if you're not familiar, and I think I kind of tried to lay things out in some emails and some discussion a couple weeks ago. In the sort of final review of the warrant, the building commissioner had kind of looked a little bit more closely at the language here, and basically his opinion was there are 8 kind of amendments to the cut and fill bylaw that the first 7 are really kind of inside the existing special permit process. So anyone that needs to get a special permit under the cut and fill bylaw, it applies to them when they get in. And so there's no change there. And what he saw in the eighth bullet, which we can bring up on the screen in a minute, was basically, in his opinion, an expansion of the threshold for what types of projects were going to be, required to go through this special permit process. And, for better or for worse, the conversation around this bylaw has been, it's relatively circumscribed and kind of limited to tree protection. That's what all the other kind of bits of the amendment are about. And it wasn't going to change the scope of the bylaw in a significant way in terms of who would need to get a special permit. It would really just add requirements to people that were already needing to get a special permit. And so that eighth bullet, which added some clarifying and kind of specific language to the exceptions to the bylaw, really, in his opinion, kind of opened up the special permit process to much smaller projects than I think he had originally anticipated when he had first read the bylaw. It was a little bit late in the game, so it is what it is. But I think, we're all very interested in, when we pass zoning, making sure that the building commissioner is on board. He's eventually the one that enforces the zoning and staffs the Board of Appeals. And so, his opinion carries a good deal of weight. And so, in that interest, we wanted to see, what are the options here? Because the planning board obviously had an intent, to protect trees, which is what we're after. And so, is there a way to continue going forward with this bylaw in a way that addresses the building commissioner's concerns, but also, doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, to use a term that was used at the warrant committee this evening. And so, I think the simplest and cleanest thing would be to just sort of remove the problematic kind of section of the amendment, consider the implications, try to figure out a way to kind of get after the intent of it in a way that, satisfies the building commissioner at a later time, and, get all the rest of the good stuff that was proposed by the planning board in those first 7 bullet points that, add the tree protection plan and are just sort of a part of the normal special permit process. Denny had worked out some language that on a kind of substantive basis probably would have addressed, I think, the building commissioner's concerns. But town council didn't think that it was within the scope of the original bylaw, and so kind of wouldn't have been possible to do that type of an amendment. And so, the 2 remaining options were pull the entire thing entirely or pull the problematic section. And I think what the proposals of the warrant committee would have been was to pull the problematic section, keep the first 7 bullets, pull the 8th one, easy peasy. So let me bring that up right now just so that you can all see it in action, and then I'll let you know what happened at the warrant committee. So just because Kevin's other kind of said, he said the warrant committee should chime in on this and kind of update their recommendation. So their meeting was tonight. That's why I wasn't here at 7:00 because I was in front of the warrant committee, kind of just explaining what the thinking here was.
And to remind everybody, we did vote this at our last meeting as a board, that the recommended strategy of the town council, which is to drop that 8th bullet, was what we wanted to do.
Okay, good. So we're all
meeting tonight and shared that.
So let me just so you can just kind of see it in action. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. Can you all see that?
No.
There we go.
So you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the what the board voted on last week, and what kind of was sent to the warrant committee, and what would go on the green sheet, is something that looks like this. So this is the original article, just striking out this term here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 remaining amendments that deal with trees and tree protection plans. And then in kind of practice, really all it's doing is just saying, subsection 5A stays what it already is. The same bylaw that we have had for however long we've had this bylaw. No change to this, and that's what it looks like. So what we sent, what's on the warrant right now, looks like this without the strike through here. And what we're saying is we actually want to take out the language that we wanted to insert, so it's the same as it's always been. I'm repeating myself for a reason. That what the planning board is proposing is for the bylaw to be the same in this regard. So all it's doing is adding additional kind of reporting and analysis requirements to people that are already getting a special permit under this bylaw anyway. There's no new requirements for different types of projects. We can kind of figure out how we want to do that at a later time. So I explained this to the warrant committee, and the bit of backstory that I also provided was that there are a lot of people in town, on the planning board, in town hall, that are interested in this bylaw, in terms of making sure that it's achieving the things that we want our cut and fill bylaw to achieve. I think everyone recognizes, the building commissioner does, the planning board does, the warrant committee, everyone recognizes that a lot of the projects that we're seeing, both special projects, subdivisions, and even standard, zoning compliant projects are, really doing a lot of clearing and a lot of grading. And I think everyone kind of recognizes that there is a need to kind of put a little more thought into this and to really make some bigger changes to kind of protect the landscape of the town. And so, what I had said was there's a working group made up of a couple members of the planning board and myself and the building commissioner and the town engineer that are really kind of drilling deep into this bylaw, but that everyone was in agreement that these tree protection changes were both relatively circumscribed in nature. Again, they're just adding additional requirements to people that are getting a special permit anyway. And that were important in their own right, and that are worth kind of doing at this time. Because again, we look at a lot of projects that have been approved, either through a building permit or a special permit from the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, that are, taking down a lot of trees in a way that, we'd like to do something about. I don't want to speak for the warrant committee, but my take from them is that they want to see things done right the first time. And so the idea of kind of taking multiple bites at the apple seemed to them to be an indication that this wasn't as fully baked as it could have been. And so the upshot of all of this is that, even though the warrant committee had previously voted to make a recommendation to approve the bylaw as it was originally proposed to be amended by the planning board, they have amended that recommendation to recommend that the entire thing be sent back to the planning board for further study. Again, I think, I'll let their recommendation speak for it, but just based on my experience and having that discussion with them earlier this evening, I think that the sentiment is that, there was a change and now we're changing the change. And it just seems like, the planning board and whoever has an interest in this bylaw needs to kind of put more thought into it and get it right in one shot. And so that's what the green sheet will say.
So I want to apologize to Denny because she spent 2+ years thinking about this and working on this. And I think that, it's unfortunate that the warrant committee took that position because I think their position was ill-informed.
So April and Denny and Tim and all of us, there have been times when we went back and asked the warrant committee to reconsider their recommendation. And I would like to suggest that this is one of them that we do that with again. And maybe it will require more manpower, if you will, more support for Tim. Because one of the things that I think is just we have another 6 months at least or more, before another town meeting that this would come up at. And we could be reviewing any number of projects in the meantime. Have you guys driven by Pleasant Street recently?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And how long did we talk about that? And, how many
Well,
times?
this is also the 40B is before the ZBA. I mean, I know
Exactly.
that exactly. That's why I think we don't want to sit on this personally, but
It was universal support.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think we go back and ask them to reconsider. When are they meeting again?
That I don't know. I know they have, they refer to tonight's meeting as the sort of the penultimate meeting before town meeting. So I would have to look at the public meeting calendar. And again, I don't want to, there was a fair amount of discussion. I don't want to kind of speculate as to what's in everyone's hearts and minds. It just, again, it struck me and their recommendation can speak for itself, and we can talk to whatever members we want. But again, it just seemed like the attitude was, we don't want to do this now. And then, maybe I shared too much about kind of the thought process behind this. I thought it was a good bit of background to say that, there's a group of people that are working on fundamental changes to this. But I do think that, again, they seem to be of the mind that, rather than amend this bylaw multiple times, let's just amend this bylaw once. If that means that it needs further study, it needs further study. And,
But Tim, I will say that we go back and amend our zoning bylaws frequently. The Ice House was revised probably twice. We revised even the small zoning that was done for down by the food mart. I mean, we don't get everything done right necessarily with zoning the first time. I think, or very little of it done right the first time. And I think, maybe, and no offense to you, Tim, whatsoever, but maybe if April or Denny just did a phone call to George and say, George, we understand you had a robust conversation about it, but this is really important. And, and we think waiting 6 months could really be detrimental to what we're trying to accomplish with the trees alone.
Yeah.
Just see if we'll do it.
If I could just weigh in for 1 second, the other piece of this, and Tim, it's not your fault. I think that they're looking at an overpacked agenda, and I really do, to say the least.
Seriously, Denny, I don't think this one thing is going to make that agenda look
No, but
any
I
shorter.
think at this point they are realizing they put a few too many things on the agenda, and they would do anything because people are going to want to go home at some point. So I'm afraid that we're just a casualty in that. I don't think it was Tim, but the other piece of this is that we don't know how long that working group is going to need to work on this. We don't know how much time the engineer has to offer this. We don't even know where the engineer is at because we haven't really begun to have those discussions. So I was trying to telegraph that it might be in a year, it might be in 2 years. But personally, I think I'm not speaking for Cheryl, but I wouldn't be surprised if she agreed with me. I wanted to rush as fast as I could because I'm worried about the 40Bs with the, earth material and removals and fill and all.
I would like to see this move along very quickly on the cut and fill because it's the kind of thing where I felt like on Pleasant Street, we did what we could do because we didn't have the tools to make further demands. And I would like more tools to make further demands on these applications so we don't have to live with that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. But we didn't have, but even still saying that, I think our goals are there, but we don't know if we can do it in 3 months or 6 months or a year or 2. We never know until we start getting in and really working away on it, how long it takes. These things can be complicated and end up taking more people. But anyway,
yeah, and Cheryl, no offense taken whatsoever on that. It's one of these things where, this is kind of like, I'm a big boy, but also like I wasn't really interested in throwing haymakers at the warrant committee because I think they've got enough problems. So I think I did a good enough job kind of explaining what the planning board's thinking was, and I thought, explaining kind of the real narrow focus of this. But again, it may a follow-up conversation may be, worthwhile to have.
Well, because I would I would suggest that because I'd rather not have it be kind of a disagreement on the floor of town meeting. I'd rather, George is a good guy, and I think you're right, Denny, that they've got a lot on their plate. But I think if one of you, just said, would you reconsider this? And here's why we really think it's important. We really respect how much your time on this, et cetera, et cetera. Just because they have done it before. I forgot exactly what it was, but it was last year, and we asked them to go back and do that. So, and they did.
What I would propose is that Denny and I make that appeal to him, or maybe send an email even tonight. I can call you after this.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll ask him to reconsider. And I think I'd
hate to see Denny's work go down the drain. So.
I know. And
This is watching this.
But it's the one and only zoning amendment we're ever going to see. Not what the public complained about. Everyone, literally the entire universe was in support of this article. And to suggest that the change we're making, which is not to make the change to that one, is the deal breaker, is like
the one that pushed over.
Yeah. We'll try to remedy that. I know the warrant committee is tired. We're meeting a lot, so maybe. And Tim, I'm sure you did a terrific job representing us, so thank you for doing that. Okay, so we will ask them to reconsider and then report back, I guess, the results of those conversations. Rich, did you have anything to add on this?
Nope, no, not at all.
Okay. And then the last thing
I agree.
on our item on our agenda tonight is a quick overview of the CBD projects, which I think Cheryl asked for at the last meeting, or maybe Kathleen, I can't remember. I don't know if you want to do this now or you want to leave this for another meeting, but this was going to be for Tim just to kind of run through the status of each of the 9 projects.
So I can, oh, I'm sorry, Denny.
I'm so sorry because I really have to get to a couple of things because it's election morning, and I had set aside a certain amount of time, and I thought we'd be done by 9:30 tonight, but I can pick up and watch this on tape if you want to continue. But I'm sorry, I should probably.
So there's no news on Amer Road or 936 Brush Hill Road, if that's kind of something that folks are concerned. I do believe that those project eligibility letters were issued a couple months ago.
They're good for
ago.
2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, I have nothing on any kind of application or anything. And then the other thing, and I'll just real quick on 652 Canton Ave. Again, no decision on the site approval on that. Mass Housing has given us the opportunity to provide some additional comments from this. It's more, I mean, they've asked for staff comments essentially on kind of, what we've learned from 648 and if it kind of has any effect on questions that we raised in a previous set of staff comments on this project. So all of that is say it's kind of on a staff level of kind of just giving them as much information about 652 and about concerns that were raised in the town's original comment letter. And so we've been working on that. I've been working with the town administrator's office on that. So that decision on Mass Housing part has not been made yet. So there's no site approval on 652 and no news on any applications for Amer Road and 936 Brush Hill Road.
So if that satisfies everybody for now, maybe we can adjourn, and at the next meeting, Tim can do a little bit more. I mean, by May 13th, there may be more updates anyways.
Well, I can just tell I've been sitting in on most of them, and the issue is stormwater on both Canton Ave and on Blue Hill Ave. And they've had to go back and do redesigns on both of them. And so the engineer, Jim Burke, is behind the 8 ball on trying to provide that updated report. And they're also doing, probably been asked to do a redesign on Blue Hill. And And then, as I said, the East Milton one is going along. That's just the start. And they're just, doing their presentation. I think the next hearing, is just on landscaping, or something, a limited agenda. So none of those are appropriate for us to be providing our letter yet, because we want to see what the peer reviewer is going to say about the revised stormwater. The stormwater situation on Canton Ave is pretty unbelievable, and they haven't figured out a way to address that at all. On Blue Hill Ave, it's probably fixable, but they haven't provided new plans yet. And they've been asked to, but pretty severely by Jeff Mullen, to redesign that project again, take another look, and sort of back the buildings away from Meeting House Lane. So.
Okay.
And because Ice House has been on Thursdays, and so we haven't been able to catch it. Tim, where does the Ice House stand real quick?
So Ice House is basically, they've gotten their kind of marching orders from the peer reviewers, and are still in the process of making revisions based on the advice of the peer reviewers. They had wanted to come back on the 29th for an update, but they're just not ready. So they're just still working. But I think everyone's hopeful that they'll be able to make those changes and come away with a better project.
And we sent in our letter on that.
So are they flipping the design based on the peer review architect's recommendation or suggestion?
That I don't
think
know.
so. I sat in on the last one. I don't think so.
Okay.
And we said in our letter that we didn't agree with it.
Right. Okay. Okay. And one last thing, is there any limit to how many 40Bs a town can have to review? Like really?
So if we were to get an application tomorrow for 16 Amer Road, for instance, we would be able to apply for a stay on opening that hearing until one of the active hearings right now was closed. So the threshold is essentially, if you're considering projects that add up to 300 units, which we are right now across the 4 projects, you can request a stay on opening additional hearings until you're kind of back below that threshold.
And what about on the project eligibility side? You can go to 10, 11, 12.
You can, I mean,
I don't
yeah,
think there's no limit on those.
You get 100 if you wanted. Well, you wouldn't want it, but there's nothing on that.
There's no cap on that.
Okay.
Because that's not a hearing process for us. That's a mass housing capacity issue, not ours.
Well, still staff has to make comments to send to the select board, to send to mass housing.
They do, not necessarily. Other towns don't do anything. I mean, that's our process, but not every town follows that.
Not that it matters much to mass housing, but.
Well, I mean, I think their perspective is we're in violation of our obligation, so.
Yeah.
Get with the program is what they're telling us. And, I don't think, like I said earlier, they're a very sympathetic party to the state at this point. And I frankly can see that we've earned that. But anyways, that's another conversation. Denny has to go. I think that concludes our business for this evening. So for the final time, I will motion to adjourn.
I'm not coming back.
Somebody has to make a motion to adjourn.
Denny did.
Do that, Kathleen.
Second.
Second. Okay, then let's do our final roll call. Cheryl Tagayas.
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell.
Yes, with thanks to April.
Rich Beeler.
Yes.
Denny Swenson.
No, you can't go.
April Anderson. Good night, Milton.
We at last, thank God Almighty.
Thank you very much. I'm joking, but it's been an honor of a lifetime. I really appreciate all of your friendship, everybody's hard work, all of our partners on all the other boards and commissions, and of course our A+ staff that you're going to be lucky enough to work with moving forward. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure, April.
Thank you.
Thank you, April.
Thank you. Mwah. Bye-bye.
Bye.